Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Nice to see you again. Today, this is the subcommittee of our large task force focusing on how town can generating the income themselves. So today, we're gonna share our thought and idea. I know we sent that to legislator research for you to review. I'm sure you all did. So please kindly present if you have anything, any thought and idea, kindly. Thank you.
Hi, this is Tamim Ahmed. I would like to present some proposed proposals, if that is, and allow me to share.
Please share, the screen kindly.
Yeah, I can share. Hi, so I put in some thoughts into the various ways that we can get the fund to repeal the automobile tax, and there is no basically a clear-cut solution. Has to be, the various entities that will have to bear the pain of getting it across. I mean, if you look at the case studies of Rhode Island and Georgia and Virginia, you will see there were some hiccups, and most of these were done on a longer time frame, typically 5 years. And some of the states ended up dipping into the sales tax revenue, like Rhode Island. Ultimately, Georgia has done a different way of looking at it, and Virginia has frozen it at certain level. That means not everything is being, taken care of. Some vehicle tax is still, beyond their $950 million limit. And, there were mixed stories. And so we want to understand that this cannot be done overnight first. That means it's not a 1 year solution. It has to be a multi-year solutions, typically 3 to 5 years. And secondly, all actors will have to bear some pain in getting this. That means the towns will have to do something and the state will have to do something. So let me just show you some of the slides that I have created. The first slide is that, these numbers are typically, I've gotten it from the state sources. It can change a little bit, and we can see what the differences are. If there are minor differences, please forgive me. But this is what I know, that we need to have $1.188 billion motor vehicle tax, and that's what we want to repeal. And we want to reduce it to zero. That means we have to be able to cover this almost $2 billion from other sources. Now, if we look at a 3% inflation adjustment every year, which in the last few years has been more than that, at least 1 or 2 years, you will see that the tax amounts will, of course, get bigger every year. So if we initiate a process from the year 2024, then we will have to cover for $1.22 billion, not $1.18 billion, and it goes up at a 3% rate of inflation. So in 5-year scenario, that ultimate year will be almost $1.4 billion tax from motor vehicle that we'll have to repeal. Now, how can we do it? Okay, so what I propose is that, if we have to take the tax collections from towns only, and town is responsible for covering all of it, that means we'll have to increase the property taxes, real estate property tax and personal property tax. If it is only from towns, that I mean to say, these are scenarios I want to present. If they are from the towns, then we will have to increase the real estate and property tax. Like, these are proposed numbers. I played with the numbers and I say, oh my God, the numbers are going to be pretty steep. By the end of 2028, property tax will have to go up by 11%. to 15%, depending upon how to drive the motor vehicle tax to zero in 2028. That was just simple math. That's what I thought, that property tax cannot be the only solution because it's too high. So what can we do? Let's say we get state funds from yet to be determined. Okay, where do we get state funds? That's not an issue. Issue is if we increase both tax and get state funds, general appropriation through income tax increase or state income tax increase or through sales tax increase, then we still have to get state funds from 77 million in 2024 through to 742 million to drive the motor vehicle tax to zero. Now, in this scenario, you can see that the tax on property will be much less. It's not as steep as what I had shown in the earlier, table. I mean, the earlier table showed pretty high, glide path from 2.2% real estate property tax increase to almost 11%. Here, it's going to be much less, soft landing, 1.5 to 5, still pretty high. But remember, those people who will be subjected to increase in property tax will not have to pay the motor vehicle tax. So that's, silver in the dark cloud. So silver lining in the dark cloud. That's okay. Now, what else can we do? Okay, why don't we look at the income tax revenue in Connecticut for the year 2000, financial year 2022-23, I believe. Total tax collection for the state was $10 billion. And the tax effective rate was 4.63%. So by different bands, there are 1.7 million taxpayers, and this is $10 billion is the total tax collection. And you can see different effective rates for different bands of incomes. So what happens, played with the number, why don't we change some effective rates? Okay, we consider anyone above $100,000, and let's start changing it slightly so that holding the first two bands without any change in income tax, we increase from $100,000, we increase the numbers. So the effective rates, after all, is not that large, but for example, it was, or we originally started from 4.63%, and if we do some small change for those over $100,000, we can get 4.8%, and then gliding up to 4.9, 5, etc., 5-year term. But what will this do is we will get additional income of $376 million to $424 million in each year, additional income from tax revenue by increasing the rates, as I showed you before. This rate, 4.78 to 4.85, all that, is changing thing. Now, why don't we bring this here and say, hey, we want only state funds and no property tax increase? What will happen? Well, with the income tax, we put in everything in the income tax here. And of course, we in the first year, we will not need anything because the offset is only 20% on the motor vehicle tax. So we won't need any other sources of state fund. But ultimately, we need increasing amount of state funds from other sources because the income tax increase will not be able to cover the entire deficit of giving up motor vehicle tax. Of course, you can say we can increase it even more, the income tax rates, and we can get more. But even with the modest increase that I have proposed, we will still need almost to a tune of $1 billion in other sources. That means other sources will have to kick in. Now, one of the solution could be, Yeah, other sources, income tax, other sources. And what about real estate and personal property taxes increasing 1.5% the first 2 years and followed by 2.5% increase for the next 2 years and ending with a 3% property tax increase? Then the landing is going to be softer because then the state funds will cover bulk of it. And then we will need other sources, non-income tax sources. And at the same time, the consumers or the property tax owners will have to cough up a little bit, like higher residential estate. Uh, you know, that might be another thing. So just identifying some numbers, not proposing anything. I think most of it will depend upon this task force, but task force can look at these numbers carefully and reach an opinion. Okay, that's about it. Any questions?
Dr. Ahmed, thank you. It's really great presentation. So you was talking about the income tax raise. So income tax raising, you talking about everyone or just a certain bracket you talking about? I was confused a little bit there.
Yeah. So income tax 3. Okay. If you look at the income tax, we are not raising income tax in the first two brackets, 0, 0, 0. You can see that, right? It is on the bands of people over 100,000 that we are proposing a slight increase in income tax and a little bit more on the bands over a million or 500 and 1 million. But these bands, these numbers are all hypothetical. But the poor people, if we consider poor people under 100,000, they will not have to pay anything in it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone, any question for Dr. Ahmed?
I do have a quick
Yeah.
question for Dr. Ahmed, if
Please,
you allow me.
Ahmed.
Okay, so your presentation was excellent. I think it gets the issue moving in a lot more directive way. Question to you is that the car property tax, is it including the car registration fee also? I'm just curious.
Oh, I haven't considered the registration fee. I do not know where they fall in. They may be falling in a sales tax, Ram.
Okay.
So I do not have very good. I have the data, but I do not know the interpretation of the sales tax data that I have requested.
So in the tax,
Right.
the car registration fee, and there is also another revenue was from the car emission test. Those are the two that I had a question. And
Yeah.
the third thing, I think the idea of raising it in increments is a great idea because that will ease the pain. And I do see this is the much better method, even if the rate has to be tweaked a little bit, than going after the property tax. Let me give you an example what I mean. So let's say somebody is having a combined income of $100,000. It is not in my view, I see that it will be a lot more appropriate or acceptable to pay a little bit of increase on my income than somebody who owns a more expensive property, but his income is at the same level as me. So he will end up paying more property tax. So I think your proposal is much more fair, equitable, and just tweaking the numbers, I think, should give us enough funding for the deficit. So I think only that few little questions about the tax revenue from the registration, and if that brings in few $100 million more with a little bit tweaking, I think that will solve the whole problem rather than going through much more technical challenges. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I need to work with the sales data, that has that there are some tables, and I don't know whether the registration fee and all those kind of things are embedded in it, which we can broadly interpret as, state other sources, revenues from other sources, besides income tax.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khan and Dr. Ahmed. I see the Matt, I think you want to say a few things. Thanks, Matt.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Hart, and I'm the Executive Director of the Capital Region Council of Governments. We serve 38 municipalities in the Greater Hartford region. For those of you who I don't know, I've been in this role about 2 years. I've worked in local government in our state for almost 30 years now, most of it as a town manager. And I really appreciate Dr. Ahmed's work and his comments there. However, I am going to recommend that the task force recommend that the General Assembly take more of a step back, take a step back and look at the property tax system and the state's means of funding local government more comprehensively. And as part of that, we can consider ideas like Dr. Ahmed just presented. So there are 4 main reasons I want to articulate here behind my recommendation. Number one, as we all know, the motor vehicle property tax is a very important revenue source for our municipalities. And our municipalities have a limited toolkit to begin with. We're the 3rd most reliant in terms of property taxes in the nation, as CCM presented at an earlier meeting. In my former town of West Hartford, where I worked as the town manager for the current year, the motor vehicle property tax comprises roughly 9% of their general fund revenues, $20 million, and then they also receive an additional $5 million from the state's supplemental grant. Second reason is that municipalities in Connecticut are required to provide a very full set of services. We don't have county government in our state. So we've got very small towns that are struggling to fund education, public safety, public works, as well as general government. Number 3, and this could be the most important one here, I think any reduction in the motor vehicle tax is going to exacerbate the shift to real estate and to homeowners. So already we have a situation across our state where residential assessments have increased significantly due to the housing market. In some communities, those assessments have increased 30 to 40%. Commercial assessments, interestingly, are down, given what's happened in the commercial market and the shift to more hybrid work. So all of that is putting more pressure on homeowners who are living on a fixed income or maybe low income during a time when we're actually trying to increase home ownership for equity, workforce development, and other reasons. And then number 4, I want to highlight some unintended consequences. So we know historically municipalities used to receive the manufacturing and mechanical equipment grant in lieu of a tax on that type of equipment. And that was designed to promote and support manufacturing here in our state. That grant was phased out over time, and towns lost collectively about $50 million. And then another one I would cite is that supplemental grant that towns are presently receiving on the motor vehicle grant. Recall, the state has a cap in place, 32.46 mils. However, due to the function of the grant formula and local revaluations, 16 towns in our state are looking at a potential loss in that grant in the coming fiscal year. 6 of those are within my region. New Britain alone is looking at a potential loss of approaching $6 million under that grant. So those are just some unintended consequences I think we need to be cognizant of. And I think it's really incumbent that we take the time to review this more thoroughly so that we can develop a more equitable and sustainable means of funding local government here in our state. And there are organizations out there like the Federal Reserve that can assist in this work. So I really would caution us against trying to rush to come up with a solution for the next session. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to take any questions that you or others may have.
Thank you, Matt. Anyone have question for Matt? Not at this time. Thank you. I see someone hand raised. Don't see the name, the iPhone. Please, if you have anything to say, go forward.
Mr. Chairman, I assume that's probably me. It's Paul Harrington. I apologize for jumping in late. I was at a Mirror Dissolution Authority meeting that ran a little bit long. I do appreciate the presentation. I echo what Mr. Hart just had to say, but I also, and I know this was just a starting point, but we just got a bunch of press releases releasing that, the income tax has dropped for many brackets here in the state of Connecticut, to then turn around and potentially raise that income tax on certain brackets as well. I don't know the appetite of the legislators to actually take that on. And I throw that out for just a discussion point that, we just, January 1st, we went lower. And then if we turn around 8 months later and raise it for certain brackets, and I believe, and I am on my phone, so I couldn't really see the presentation all that well, but I believe one of the brackets that we are looking is brackets that did just take a decrease in their overall tax rate. So I throw that out just for conversation purposes.
Thank you, Paul. Also, I see.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, and I don't, and I'm just spitballing right now. And, can we look at potentially the sales tax? Is that a way of potentially generating some additional revenue to help if this tax goes away? And what small amount can that go up to make, cities and towns whole? Again, I don't have the answer, but is that another avenue that we should be looking at? But I agree with Mr. Hart that we shouldn't rush into this. And obviously, whatever we come up with, we obviously want full passage. So rushing is definitely, I don't think, the option we want to go with. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Of course, we are not rushing. This is why we create the task force, looking all the avenue we have, see how we can generate the lost income per town and city. This is why we create this task force. But every idea is important. Not every idea going to become a law. So, but good to hear from everyone. Thank you. Now I see, Mr. Mayor, you can, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and want to echo the comments made by you about the fact that that's exactly what we're here to talk about and to contemplate, and to also agree with my colleague Paul and with Matt from RiverCog, from CRCog. I'm in my Middlesex County mode, but we I think need to look at this comprehensively. I think that a comprehensive look is the only thing that's going to make sense. And one of the things that was I really appreciated about your presentation, Dr. Ahmad, is the fact that we were able to look at a couple of different scenarios in terms of how they would have a global or a statewide impact, different approaches to different outcomes and how that would work. I do think phasing in is something to be considered, and it's wise to be considering regardless of what policy direction we go in. But part of the reason that was helpful is to be able to see a little bit more of a comprehensive picture, and that I'm comparing that to data that we all reviewed a couple of meetings ago. It was my first meeting. I think it was the first my first full committee meeting, and the second full committee meeting for some others, where we saw the incredibly disparate numbers from town to town in terms of what the incomes were from different sources of property tax revenue. There were some towns that had 90+% of their property tax revenue coming from residential real estate. My colleague for Selectman Harrington has a significantly larger portion coming from the motor vehicle tax, and because of the fact that Windsor Locks is home to Bradley International Airport. And so the deltas between how much revenue were coming from different types of property taxes in different types of communities was really kind of striking. And I think that it is one of them. I mean, we talk a lot, and importantly so, about the inequity that people that residential taxpayers will pay, or that motor vehicle owners will pay, depending on whether they live in a town with a low mill rate and a really robust grand list, or a high mill rate because they have a weaker grand list. But I think it's also, it was important for us to get under the hood, so to speak, and see that some towns are getting 90% of their property tax revenue from residential real estate and only a tiny fraction from motor vehicles. Some are in the double digits and pretty significant double digits for that motor vehicle revenue because of, for a whole variety of reasons, right? It's 169 reasons divided by the number or multiplied by the number of property tax revenue collection that we do, which is on residential real estate, commercial real estate, motor vehicles, and also on commercially used personal property. So I think comprehensive approach is really important, and we can't study the car tax effectively. And I don't think that, I will say I appreciate the fact that the task force is, I think, looking in a comprehensive direction, that we are considering how the car tax will impact other revenue collection, even at the local level. I agree with, I'll just lastly say, agree with Paul on the notion that we do need to be looking at things like a local sales tax or a statewide, impact on the sales tax, and how we can make up for that. But I don't think that sales tax revenue alone will be a solution that we can move away from the motor vehicle tax based on that alone. I think it does need to be a comprehensive look. I am also, this is the last thing I'm going to say, I'm sorry. I am somebody who is sympathetic to and believes that we should be taking a look at the income tax rates. Representative Chafee articulated that at the last subcommittee meeting earlier this week. And Commissioner Boughton also articulated at that meeting a point that Paul was just making, which is that it is sending a little bit of a mixed message to be revisiting the income tax so soon after we for better or for worse, to revisit that issue in the last legislative session. I think it's important that it be part of the conversation, but I think that we need to be cognizant of the sort of political whiplash that will create among the legislators and among the residents. So more ideas to throw out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for clearing these things. So I have a quick question, Mr. Mayor. Question is, how much the revenue from the car tax you collect, and what is the cost for collecting?
I don't have that number in front of me. I wish I did, so I'll pull that up. But I think that I was struck again by how disparate it is from one town to the next in terms of how much is coming, how much of the, not necessarily the net amount coming from one town to the next, but how much of their tax base, how much of their grand list, how much of their revenue to pay for municipal services came from the motor vehicle tax versus other forms of the property tax that we're collecting. It's all the same mill rate, right? It's the same rate across all of those forms of the property tax. We can't adjust a 30 mill rate for motor vehicles and a 40 for real estate, but there's still wild differences between the amounts. Let me pull up the Middletown numbers, and we can circle back around.
No rush. That's thank you so much, because I know the most town or city, they don't collect the tax themselves. They're giving that third party to collect for them, and that's cost. I believe, like I have the data in here, Manchester, they may be collecting $15 million, but their cost is over $1 million in the yearly collecting those tax. Thank you.
I can say, Mr. Chairman, that we are not among the towns that contract that service out, but it is there is a cost associated with it one way or the other, right? It is a challenging process. We do contract out the assessment process when it comes to assessing local properties. We just went through that revaluation last year for residential real estate. That 30 to 40% number that was quoted earlier is accurate, if not conservative in our case, for the increase and the impact on the staff and the impact on contracting practices. Again, that would also be a big factor. And I see that Commissioner Bowden has his hand raised too.
Awesome, thank you. You know, obviously, big city, collecting cost is lower than the small town like Bolton or Andover. Summers, their cost really is sky high when collecting the tax. Pretty much, I see the data saying. Well, thank you so very much. I really appreciate it, and I think you want to okay, go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for having a task force on this issue. I think it's something that is always in the minds of our people in Connecticut and our legislators. But I'm Susan Johnson. I represent the 49th House District, and we are one of the poorest districts in the entire state. We also have more subsidized housing on a per capita basis than anywhere else in the state of Connecticut, except for Hartford. We have Eastern Connecticut State University. We have the Wyndham Hospital. We have an airport. All of these things are properties that get payment in lieu of taxes. And we do have a number of nonprofit properties that don't receive any payment in lieu of taxes. And so what happens is we subsidize our region to the tune of $6 million just for the properties that do not pay any tax at all. We also have a larger percentage of people who have students that have special ed needs, and that is not properly reimbursed by the state. So what happens because of those kinds of issues that we suffer with, and we have been suffering with for several years now, since the 90s really, and now we're finally getting caught up on the education cost sharing grant. We have one of the things we rely on for our revenue for the town of Wyndham has to do with the car tax. So we actually have such a high rate that we're eligible for the car tax grant that was put into effect in 2015. So the car tax grant is something that really helps municipalities that actually serve their regions. We have 3 homeless shelters. We serve the region by providing for housing for people that do not have access to housing in the more wealthy communities. So when you have a community where the population is middle income, upper income, these things are maybe an issue that they'd like to see that annoying tax bill go away. On the other hand, when you have, the last time this proposal came through in 2015, the town of Wyndham, had about a $10 million budget for town operations townwide, except for the emergency, fire and police. They are excluded from the town budget, but they're not from the overall town budget. But the police and fire are separate districts. So we have separate districts in those circumstances. So in the Willimantic Service District, for example, we have a mill rate of almost about 45 right in there. And when you get to the whole town, the hotel mill rate was about 35. But because we pay paid police and paid fire in Willimantic, which is the largest part of Wyndham, it's about 17,000 people, and the whole town is 25,000 people. We really rely on that because a lot of the property that we have is rental. So the people who rent don't necessarily pay property tax. They do pay for it in their rental, lease agreements, but they don't necessarily pay for property taxes. So in any event, around 2015, we were collecting approximately $4 million in taxes, and we lose about $6 million in revenue because of all the subsidies that we give to people. So if we lost the $4 million, which is probably increased by now almost 10 years. And we actually get into a situation where we are right now at a disadvantage just based on the subsidies for the nonprofits and those kinds of things is about $6 million. So now we're going to lose almost the entire value of what it actually costs to run the town of Wyndham. And so the car tax grant was an excellent idea. It's something that I supported. The car tax grant is something that at least puts the cost and it levels it out throughout the state if you have a very, very, very high situation where you're not, necessarily subsidizing your region like we do. Hartford subsidizes all the towns around it. Hartford has all the housing issues right here. Waterbury, Bridgeport, New Haven, all those places have non-profit, non-taxable property or pilot property, which has been remedied to some degree. That in 20 about 3 years ago, 4 years ago now, we created a 3-tiered system for the payment in lieu of taxes situation. So we have we've done some things to fix some of the problems with the property tax issue that we have in the state. But what we really need to do, if we really want to fix the issue, is we need to fully fund special education. We need to make sure that there are all housing access available throughout in every single town. We need to make sure that we are evenly providing for every town. And this may actually emphasize, if we got rid of the property tax on the cars, may actually create a situation where we're going to put more burden on the towns that have already are not getting any money at all for some of their properties, and are doing good work for their region, but are not being considered when we have these proposals coming forward. So and I understand the analysis so far has been, if we were to eliminate that and fully subsidize what the towns get, it's about $1 billion is my understanding. But to transfer that to the businesses and to the low-income homeowners who barely can afford the property tax now, that cost shift to those people will cause them to have to sell, have to move into someplace else. We have a housing crisis now. Where are they going to move to? Where are the low-income homeowners that have been in those homes their whole lives and want to stay there? Where are they going to go if they can't afford their property tax anymore? How are you going to subsidize them? So those are some of my concerns, and I'm glad to be able to have the chance to chat about this. And I think that one thing that might help answer some of these questions, and I'm trying to look into this, is to just see what the tax rate would be if we did that now. What will people be paying on their properties? Will they be able to stay in their homes? Will they be able to stay? Will the businesses come to towns that serve their regions, that provide for their regions, like Wyndham does for all the surrounding towns, or like Hartford does for all the surrounding towns? We need to take a look at that. We need to look at the whole state and make sure that we're not going backwards to the way we were before we had the car tax grant, before we had the 3-tiered payment in lieu of taxes system. We need to move forward to provide the care, because what does it do? What does it do if you increase the property tax and the people vote down the school budgets? It hurts the children in the school system. And it's hurt the town of Wyndham children in the school system for years and years, not having the full education cost sharing grant that we finally are getting now. It hurts kids. So when we think about this, we think about the families, we think about the senior citizens trying to make ends meet by paying the property tax. We need to take a look at what we're actually doing and the impact that it has. So I thank you for letting me chat about this, and thank you for your work on analyzing the situation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Really good stuff. This is why we are here, create this task force, to listening and hearing from every, corner in the state. But we all the legislator and the state of Connecticut knows very well is unfair car tax and regressive. Should be fair, should be, progressive. This is why we all working together and create this task force, not rational, smoothly looking all the avenue, what we can do, how we can repeal this car tax, how we can, help our town and city, 169 town and city, depending on the income. So this is why we are here. I thank you kindly for coming in and share your thought. Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, yes, floor producer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to make sure everybody can hear me okay, if you can. Thank you. I'm on my phone today. It's a long story. I just wanted to circle back to Matt Hart's comments. I think everybody, from Matt to Rep. Johnson has a perspective and has interesting thoughts and ideas, but I do think it illustrates the point that when we eliminate this tax, and I don't think anybody on here doesn't want this tax to go away, there are dozens of unintended consequences that happen after that. And so part of what we need to do is we need data and we need to understand what certain key decisions do when we eliminate one tax or add to the income tax. What's the impact on that and who does it impact? I mean, there's just a lot that goes into this. So I'd like to make a couple suggestions. One is we benchmark ourselves against other states. Let's find out what other states are doing, at least in New England, include New York and maybe New Jersey in that as well, to find out how do they handle the payment of their infrastructure within municipalities, whether they use the county form of government or not, which most of them do, or whether they go through the cities and towns, or whether the state just takes responsibility for that. I'd like to know that, and I'd like to understand what their funding mechanism would be for that. Two, I think we need to look at what have been the past proposals that have come before the legislature, going back as far as we've had the car tax. I'd like somebody to pull all those, and I'd like to read through all of them and see what they thought and what they didn't think about this kind of tax. I know last one I remember was mentioned was 2015. That was Governor Malloy. I recall I thought Governor Rell at one point had proposed that, where she didn't backfill the money at all. They just wanted us to absorb it within at the time I was mayor, absorb it into our mill rate. So I'd like to see what's been proposed in the past, because those proposals didn't make it. And if they didn't make it, then we need to make sure that whatever we talk about, whatever our end product is, would be something that could actually get enacted, right? Nobody wants to sit here and go to meeting after meeting and find out the legislature isn't interested in taking it up, or there's no will by the governor to sign it. So I think that'll give us a good roadmap, what was done in the past. And then finally, and I don't sense this, I think you're right, the task force is a task force for a reason, right? Our reason is to go out and try to look at this initiative. I don't think we should, first of all, I don't think you'd get anything done this session anyways, to be very frank with you. I don't think anybody has the appetite in the February to May session to want to do something with this. So I'm not sure what the statute said about what the reporting date was, but even if we reported out and said we're still working, that's not a bad report right now. So we can take our time. I think we also ought to ask the legislature for a little bit of money, a couple $100,000 for staffing and to be able to do this the right way. Because I think once we start carving in the income tax, carving in other taxes, now we're talking about the entire tax structure for the state of Connecticut and the property tax, right? So we really need to have a long discussion about what we think that ought to look like, and then try to build capacity within the legislature to support that. And that takes time. It takes research, and it's going to take a staff to be able to do this and do it the right way. This is a big ask when you really look at it. And I think you've done a great job serving as leader of this group. So those are just my thoughts. I think they were borne out by Rep. Johnson's concerns. She's a representative. I sat in her chair, not that district, but I sat in her chair, and I know you're worried about, hey, what's the impact of my community? What if this money never gets replaced? And we just heard from Mayor Florsheim, who's a brilliant mayor working very hard in Middletown, and he has concerns, but he wants the tax eliminated as well. And so everybody's got some thoughts. They're all really good and valid, as you've mentioned already. And I like some time. I don't want to feel the pressure of a report out date in February. I like to be able to take some time and get this right, so that we can maybe get it actually enacted, which I think would be a victory for the taxpayers of the state.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Yeah, some degree I'm with you also. We are not rushing, and we should not rush. Make sure we are listening and hearing from everyone. And after the final meeting, of course, we will thoroughly and carefully review all the idea we have and presented in the committee. We have a genius committee we created, and we will listen to everyone and put the report together, and we're going to go from there. And thank you so much for coming in. And anyone have any other idea? You want to share anything? Awesome. Well, thank you so very much. We really grateful for your times and effort you putting on this committee.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm driving. That's why my sincere apologies. If you permit me 2 minutes, that will be kind enough. I think what everyone was saying, we all agree that it should be a comprehensive solution. And at the same time, the towns and the municipalities, the way they operate, would like to make sure that that status quo is maintained. Oh my God. Sorry, there is a police car behind me.
I'm sure you pull over.
No, I did put on, I'm on the sideline. But I think he just thought I need some assistance. Just hold on a second. So what I was thinking is there may be other avenues that we might look into.
Take your time, Dr. Anwar. Thank you.
We are fine, sir. We are fine.
Everything all right?
Everything all right.
Okay, you can't pull over here. It's not safe, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. So we're going to let you know our next meeting. I don't know, Madam Clerk, do you have the next meeting date and times? If not, Madam Clerk will shoot you an email and let you know date and time our next meeting. Thank you again. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.